Unlock the power of your mind. This is Provocative Enlightenment with Eldon Taylor.
Welcome and thank you for joining us today. The next hour is devoted to learning something more, not just about the world of shoes and ships and sealing wax, but about how, what, and why we believe as we do. A time for those willing to question what they think they know or what they may believe. Those willing to be uncertain for an hour. I'm Eldon Taylor, and this is Provocative Enlightenment. All right, our chat room is open, and my partner Ravinder awaits you there now. She's got double duty today. So you can log on by going to provocativeenlightenment.com/chat. Now, Ravinder, you have to pay attention today. You can't get too involved in the chat room. You do understand that. So tell us all about your chat room.
Yeah, you are having me do double duty today, but I've had some practice at this, so I will be in the chat room and on the air simultaneously, perhaps. The chat room is a wonderful group of people, all contributing and adding different elements and different dimensions to the conversation. I always learn a bunch, and I have a laugh in there too, sometimes a little bit too much, because I do get distracted when Eldon is on the air, but oh well, it's all good fun. Come join us. That is provocativeenlightenment.com/chat.
All right. In this week's Spotlight, I want to pause for a moment and reflect on the importance of relationships. That happens to be what our show is about. But in a recent newsletter, Ravinder reminded me of something I wrote many years ago as a result of a dream. The next morning, I wrote the dream down, and ultimately it became the Little Black Book, something we sell for a mighty $2 just to get the message out. The bottom line, something I have referred to as the 3 R's, and not for reading, writing, and arithmetic. No, my 3 R's can be said this way. Reality is relative to relationships. Think about it this way. When you leave this corporal life, we will not take our trophies, diplomas, possessions, and so forth. What we will take is our experiences, and especially those with other beings. In other words, our relationships are the one thing that will survive, assuming we survive at all. And I do make that assumption. I remember watching Tom Hanks' Chuck, the FedEx driver, struggle over the loss of his soccer ball in the film Castaway. Stranded on an island, no companionship, no one to talk to, not another human being to even watch, authentically portrayed what life alone could be like. The screenwriter, William Broyles, Jr., spent several days alone in Mexico's Sea of Cortez, trying to fend for himself. He speared and ate stingrays, learned how to open a coconut, befriended a washed-up Wilson brand volleyball, and tried to make fire, which ended up in the movie. His experiences led to an epiphany regarding the Chuck character. Quoting him, "That's when I realized it wasn't just a physical challenge. It was going to be an emotional, spiritual one as well." Just try to imagine without another human being in your life. What would your world be like? What would you desire most? Just asking yourself a few questions of this nature quickly leads to the appreciation we have and should have for others. Life is full of challenges, and often these challenges come down to other people. Difficult people with antagonistic ideas are not difficult to find in today's world. Sometimes they are our relatives, our neighbors, someone in the workplace or in our schools, and sometimes they are relatively unknown characters that we friend in social media platforms or watch on some television broadcast. But wherever we find them, there doesn't seem to be a shortage nowadays. But does that mean that we should look at people under that light? The light of antagonism? Or could it be, just maybe, that we have lost sight of how important others are? I read a definition of humility last week that impressed me. In the words of Rick Warren, humility is not thinking less of yourself, It's thinking of yourself less. That reminded me of something said by James Faust, and I quote, "A grateful heart is a beginning of greatness. It is an expression of humility. It is a foundation for the development of such virtues as prayer, faith, courage, contentment, happiness, love, and well-being." Close quote. I would encourage you to think back to that great film Castaway and how grateful Chuck was to have other people. Think about my 3 R's and then set your own intention for positive interactions with all. Add the gratitude for others into your life with the humility that comes from recognizing that it is only your relationships that will leave this earth plane when you do, and only your relationships that will therefore define your success in life. A gentle, forgiving heart with a mindful sense of humility will reward you, not just in the here and now, but on the other side as well. The peace, balance, and harmony we all seek in this world begins with a single act, a single person, a single intention to be what we want the world to be. My thoughts anyway. What are yours, Ravinder?
I really like that last line, what we want the world to be. I think that pretty much sums it up. You want good relationships out there. You have to be a part of making the relationships good. And I think especially today, we're coming off the back of Valentine's Day, but you just look at what's going on in the world out there in general. We are herd animals. Life is a lot better when we do stuff together. Absolutely. So thinking about those relationships and doing your best and being your part of the creative force in making it better. I think that's what I like the most about it.
We live at a time, I think, that is particularly challenging in some ways because it's so easy to look out there at people, whether they're in politics or, they're those perpetrators of heinous acts, and to be hateful toward them. It's very difficult, I think, nowadays especially, but it probably always has been, to try and see the good in everyone. But therein lies our challenge, and that's not to say that we should, remain in some abusive relationship or condone behavior that is unacceptable. But it is to say that we probably need to be just a little more mellow in how we view other people.
Absolutely. All be part of the solution instead of exacerbating the problems.
All right. Every week I read some of your letters as our way of involving you while paying respect to the very important role you play in making this show successful. Last week our show featured Dr. Norman Shealy, and we discussed his work with the use of adrenal scalar and pulse DMF gamma in health. Joshua wrote, I had to listen to the show again in the archives and then Google some of the terms before I could understand what you guys were talking about. But when I did, it all made sense. I'm sorry about that, Joshua. Ravinder actually reminded me that I should have tied some things together, like EMF and the danger it is known to cause in our cell phones, and therefore the difference between what a pulsed EMF is and what, EMF leakage is. So again, I apologize. I think if I'd have done that, the notion of pulsed EMF may have had more sense, and we could have done that with about everything. Would you like to add anything to that, Ravinder?
That was a show that exercised my brain cells, absolutely. But you've had Norm Shealy on the show a number of times before. I am a great believer in his work. So, yeah, I've been checking it out. Absolutely.
All right. CB commented, there are people who believe that scalar waves were used on the Twin Towers. I doubt that, CB. Considering Tesla's research disappearing, I could imagine if it was working that some agency has continued to research it. If that research has been towards weaponizing, I can imagine there is a lot vested in 0 point anything, not falling into mass awareness. I always find Dr. Sheely interesting to listen to. Just affording his solutions is my challenge. Moving on, Belinda wrote, I love your spotlights. You should publish them so we can quote you accurately. Well, thank you, Belinda. And we do publish them on my blog, and all of you can receive it free. Just go to eldontaylor.com/blog. Sean wrote, I began using the InnerTalk Serenity CD and found it to be a powerful tool. If you are not programming your mind, then someone else is. Thank you so much for your work. You're absolutely right about that, Sean. In this day and age, if you're not doing it, somebody else is, and it's not for your, it's not for altruistic reasons. Let's put it that way. Jorge wrote, thank you very much for the great technology that you provide. And Chance wrote, I love your InnerTalk products. They are actually making a change in the way I talk to myself. There is a lot of undoing to do, and InnerTalk is doing the work for me. Okay, that's all the time we're going to take for letters today, but we do love your comments, so please keep them coming. You can opine by writing to me at Eldon, that's E-L-D-O-N, I'll get that out, at eldontaylor.com, or by joining me on Facebook at Dr. Eldon Taylor. We do sincerely appreciate your thoughts and ideas, so please keep them coming. Now to today's show, Discovering the Keys to a Great Relationship. Ravinder and I have been repeatedly asked to do a show on relationships. We began our own almost 30 years ago. Like most relationships, the beginning was magical, but soon real life caught up to us, and we had our own struggle keeping things together. So what did we learn? What does the research say? How do you get past those difficult periods? Or are there, in fact, something that can be avoided? Do we all have to go through them? How do our expectations influence our success? What about reconciling broad differences? I mean, how important is it to have a common background, cultural influence, religious upbringing, and so forth? Do you know this is the right person? And if so, how? How do you attract that right person? Do you have a soulmate? I mean, what is a soulmate? Well, these are but a few of the questions we'll take on today. So, Ravinder, let's begin with yesterday, Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day causes many people to turn their attention in the direction of relationships. You and I have discussed relationships many times, ranging from what we see as the serial soulmate stuff to some of the crazy expectations people have regarding enduring relationships. So let's begin there. What are some of the expectations that can lead to a failing relationship?
Oh, this is probably one of my pet peeves, I suppose, to do with expectations and relationships. Time and time again, I see relationships falling apart, not because there's anything wrong with a relationship, but because one or the other person, or both of them, just have weird expectations. So, to give you some examples of what I am thinking about, you can get... Obviously, I talk about this from a female perspective because I happen to be a woman, and my friends, I've got lots of female friends, and so often you hear about, oh, our husbands do this, our husbands do that, men, you can't rely on them for anything, da-da-da-da-da. You watch the commercials on TV. They can really wind me up where you have, the couple standing together and the woman implies that her husband is stupid. There are those caricatures that can seem funny on the surface, but I think they're dangerous. I think they are really dangerous when it comes to relationships because they get into your psyche and then they influence you. So, you've been out watching that kind of TV or out talking to your friends, and then you come home and then you start expecting your partner to behave in certain ways. And, the common thing today, that lots of females are asking men to do is bring out your feminine side. Be creative, be more loving, be more this. But then they want a strong shoulder to cry on, a strong man to support them. So they're asking for contradictory things. And I think that is one example of, the kinds of expectations they have. And I'm very aware that it goes the other way around too, I think the most important thing you can do in a relationship is to accept your partner for who he is.
Or she.
Or she, obviously. I'm a woman, what can I say?
Yeah. I do think there is an opportunity for men to be just a little more, I don't like the word feminine, obviously, but a little more sensitive to that side of their lives. I can remember you wanting to watch these girly flicks, and there's a natural resistance. But,
Chick
I would
flicks.
sit down with you and, hey, they were good movies. Again, we have this rigid set of expectations about, who we are and how we're supposed to behave. And then when we bring them together in a relationship, we're not adapting ourselves to the relationship. We tend to want to be rigid about who we are, and sooner or later that romance kind of wears off, and you're into the tedium of everyday life. And if you're not actively trying to do something, and we'll talk about that in a while, but if you're not actively trying to do something to keep the romance there, pretty quick it's just gone. And then you have two people doing two different things, living their own way, feeling lonely again because they're not relating, fighting over silly things, and, the expectation that everything is roses and that there will be no difficulties, there will be no struggles,
Yep.
that you'll be forever beautiful or forever thin or whatever those, you'll be, just as sexually attractive to me 20 years from now as you were day one. They can wear really thin if we're not actively doing something to cultivate that in our relationship.
Your example of films, there's two parts of it that I want to cover there. The example about films, I think, is a really good example because, as you said, you became more open to watching chick flicks. But on the other side of it, I'm respectful of what it is that you want. So, there are degrees of chick flicks, So I do not go all the way to the one extreme. I look at it from, if you have a scale going from 1 to 10, and a 5 is right in the center, and the 1 is the extreme chick flick, and the 10 is the extreme guy flick. I try to keep it pretty centered, but I think what both of us do is we will take turns indulging each other. So we don't go to the extremes because I think that becomes disrespectful. But, you start shuffling it down to a 3, or I start shuffling it up to an 8. Caring about the other person helps a lot. And so that brings me to the very next thing I was going to say. I heard someone say, relationships isn't about everyone giving 50-50. It's about both people giving 100%. And I would go further than that. I would say if both people give 110, that's when the magic happens. And what I will definitely tell people, that if you make an effort at your relationship, then it gets better. You often hear about the first blush of romance and, being swept off your feet, and maybe the guy just finds the woman so incredibly irresistible, and to the woman, the guy's a knight in shining armor, or just whatever it is that is her favorite. But those things fade. What makes a relationship stronger is getting beyond that point. When you work beyond that and you carry on with each other, and then life experience and time adds to it, and those experiences that you may experience, like, a flood in the house or some power outage, and we've had some of those, they actually end up adding to the charm of it. They become part of the humor. They become part of the things that bond you together.
Things you did and overcame together. You're absolutely right.
Absolutely.
But when you say that, I'm reminded, one of my, as you know, 4 corner principles of a better life is self-responsibility. And I define self-responsibility a little different than many people, in the sense that whatever you can do in any situation that is a bad situation to make the situation better, you're responsible for. And, you know, we both have our own stories about how we cope with some bad stuff. But for me, it was always about, okay, look, I'm the common denominator. How can I make this better? How can I make this better? That was always what was in my mind in terms of how, you know, you improve a relationship. But then that gives rise to, you must desire that relationship. You must know going in it's going to be work, and you must truly desire to make it work. I think a lot of people have these false expectations, and because of that, the desire doesn't exist. And, you know, there you go. Your relationship crumbles as a result. But let's move on. We've seen more than one person boast they found their perfect partner, their soulmate. In a relatively short time, things didn't quite work out between the soulmates, and they separated or divorced. A few months later, and lo and behold, they found a new true soulmate. What is it about this idea of twin flames and soulmates that's all wrong, Ravinder?
All of it. Pretty much. So, and it's got this idealized way of, you know, when you're with your twin flame, your soulmate, things are hunky-dory for forevermore. You live on clouds with roses and chocolates raining down upon you, and, you know, full of passion and perfection. And real life isn't like that. It's dirty and messy, and, you know, your partner may have a problem after he eats beans, or she may have a problem, you know. That's real life. So no, the whole idea of twin flames and soulmates, I think, is creating the problem today with why relationships fall apart.
So the confusion, if I can restate what you're saying, and you correct me if I misunderstood, but the confusion comes because here's my soulmate, everything is perfect, we're just, you know, two peas in a pod, there's never going to be any difficulty, this is just going to be magical from now to the end of, well, there is no end. And it is that expectation that gives rise to the failure of these so-called soulmate relationships?
Absolutely. The fact is, all relationships take work. You know, and I would even go further than that. I think, quite honestly, there are lots of people out there that could be a perfect partner. What makes a perfect relationship is your commitment to that relationship. You know, my background is such, you know, I was born in India. As I was growing up, arranged marriages were very much the norm. And I fully expected to have one. So it's not like it's a bad thing. But that's put me in an interesting place, because I can see both sides of that spectrum. And I can tell you today that arranged marriages have the same amount of chance of having a perfect love marriage as well. It all comes down to the work that you put into it. You know, with an arranged marriage, they've been chosen when it's done correctly, and it's not always done correctly, trust me there. But when it's done correctly, there's a great deal of thought put into compatibility. So you're already, you know, you have two compatible people together, and then you've got the community, the sense of community that comes with it, and then you get an expectation. There isn't an expectation that it's going to be hunky-dory for forever. So in an arranged marriage, they start working on the marriage right away. They work to make it better. What are you laughing at?
Well, that's where I'm going to go next. You know, I'm going to ask you about how important is compatibility, simply because, look, you come from a background that is entirely different than mine. You have a different religious upbringing than I had. You're from a different culture than I am. Your family is basically, forgive me, but racist. because I'm white, they don't want anything to do with me. At least your mother and well, a large part, and you know this, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but we've discussed this before. You know, you're, forgive me again, but if you could be, you are a pacifist. You are loving. You give everybody the benefit of the doubt. I come from a law enforcement background where I might be a little paranoid, in your words, sometimes, where I'm always looking at where, you know, violence has been a part of my background, my life. The way we react to things is different. So when we get back from the break, I'm going to ask you just how important is this quote-unquote compatibility. We're speaking about lasting relationships. Now, we have a cute little video for you in our chat room posing the question, single versus relationships on Valentine's Day. So if you're not in the chat room already, now's the time to get on over there. And you can do that again by going to provocativeenlightenment.com/chat. Okay, please stay tuned. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Provocative Enlightenment with Eldon Taylor.
Change has never been easier. Whether you wish to lose weight, stop smoking, build better relationships, become creative, enjoy ultra prosperity, or simply relax and promote self-healing, InnerTalk has been repeatedly demonstrated effective in the most rigorous of scientific studies. Our customers love InnerTalk. Sean wrote, I have struggled with bulimia for over 30 years and have never been able to lose weight without restoring to it until I used InnerTalk. Vicky wrote, my hubby has been using the Stop Snoring CD and already his dangerous and raucous snoring levels have stopped. Celeste wrote, I recently graduated from Taft Law School with honors. I'm writing to tell you how much your InnerTalk CD, Excel in Exams, has helped me. With over 300 titles to choose from, there is something for everyone. Check it out today by going to innertalk.com.
Unlock the power of your mind. This is Provocative Enlightenment with Eldon Taylor.
Welcome back. If you just joined us, we're chatting about the nature of relationships. Now we chose as our bumper music today Andy Williams performing the original theme from the movie Love Story. So, Ravinder, how long does love last? And if it's indeed true love, does it ever truly die even if you're no longer with a person that you loved?
No. It lasts but forever. I mean, you come back to reality is relative to relationships and your love relationships. They stay for forever.
So what is it, do you think, that gives rise to two people that are in love and they share lots of good years together? Then they divorce and suddenly they have nothing but animosity for each other. Is that a compensation mechanism in your view, or, an expectation, a societal expectation, a justification, or were they ever really in love to begin with?
That's a complicated one. I decided a long time ago, when I was just a kid actually, that love is about what you give, not what you get. So the example that you're talking about, you can have a couple, and I've certainly heard of these, where one of them betrays the other, So then the one who's been betrayed, well, it can be tempting for that person to get angry and whatever.
Or a lot more.
Yeah, all of that stuff. For me, I've always had in the back of my mind, love is about what you give. It's not about what the other person has done. Perhaps if they've betrayed you, you can look at it as a weakness of theirs. They have their challenges. I don't know. It's complicated. It's really sad. I would rather keep to the side of,
For me, it's all of the above. It is a justification. It is an anger, nasty getting even response. It is a compensation technique. It is a socially expected. People don't typically get divorces and then saying, well, I loved him, and we had a lot of good years, and, I guess we just grew apart, or, hey, I messed up, or I don't blame them, or that kind of thing. That's just not the norm. That's not the expectation that's portrayed in the movies. But I agree with you. If you sincerely love someone, the love doesn't go away, doesn't die. It remains. Okay, I said before we went to break, how important is compatibility?
You've got that look on your face. You're right. You and I come from totally different backgrounds. I was born in India, brought up in England. My upbringing was very Indian in England. And then I meet you. Actually, my first visit to the United States, coming over to see you, I flew into Las Vegas, of all the places. I had friends who thought I'd lost my mind. Because when you look at the basic compatibility stuff, they're not there. But what they missed was our compatibility in the issues that matter to us. Our desire to look beyond societal norms, to become better people, to understand how people work, to explore the spiritual questions. Those things you and I are right on. So when it comes to the important thing, the fact is you're not going to be compatible on everything. So if you say, well, you have to be compatible in order to have a relationship, well, I think that's why lots of relationships fall apart, because, you can take 10 different characteristics. Maybe you're compatible on 5 and you're not compatible on the other 5. Well, at the beginning of the relationship, you focus on the 5 areas that you are compatible with, and then as the relationship deteriorates, you only focus on the other. You don't look
as it deteriorates?
For some people.
Okay, well, you mean as the relationship continues, then you begin to advance by dealing with the other 5, or you're saying
that could be the cause of a problem.
Turn themselves toward those differences,
there you go.
And they focus on that. Then they can deteriorate. They begin to think about, well, she squeezes a toothpaste in the middle of the tube or something. I just picked that out because it's so crazy what everybody talks about.
I know, that one's so dumb to me, but oh well. I think, it's finding the issues that are most important to you. You don't look at all of them. You just look at the ones that are important. And then that's what you focus on and build on.
You and I, to this day, almost 30 years later, still have issues that we could, if we wanted to bring them up, get really excited about disagreeing with each other on.
Absolutely.
But there is a point where you realize that the person that you're with has a right to be who they are.
Yes.
Has a right to believe what they believe. And you have that same right. And that should not tear a relationship apart. It's just a disagreement.
You agree to disagree on the stuff that, isn't life or death, or isn't, your most burning passion. Absolutely.
Okay, moving on. There's a best-selling book out there called The Secret, and it informs us that the law of attraction will bring us the perfect person if we but use it by focusing on love and visualizing the right person. What are your thoughts on this, and is there some way we can visualize the so-called right person in advance of meeting them?
I'm sorry, I think that's baloney too. Dora. I mean, if anything, you're going to create a problem. If you create a board of your ideal partner, I've heard people do this kind of stuff. Well, he has to be this height, he has to be kind, he has to be loving, he has to be. You're not going to find him because that person isn't real. As I said earlier on today, there are lots of people out there who could be compatible for you. The idea is I would say the important thing is to express your authentic self. You have to be true to yourself. So, for example, especially when people are younger, they think, oh, I have to get out there in order to meet a partner, so I'm going to go to the bar, I'm going to go to a nightclub, I'm going to go to, and perhaps they hate going to those places. You're not going to meet the right person. I always tell people, what is it that you enjoy? If you enjoy books, well, obviously you can't just sit at home and read a book and hope to find Mr. or Mrs. Right, but you could join a book club. That would be consistent with what it is that you like. If you like dancing, well, go out to a dance group, go out to dance classes, do something like that. Do what you enjoy doing. Focus on that. Don't betray yourself and start trying to fit in with what other people want.
Okay, but that gives rise to a point that came up in the chat room during the break. Two people get together and somebody says, you have no right to change me. You've just entered a relationship. I think by definition, this is my view, by definition you have accepted that you are going to change. Now, not totally, but if you go into it hard and rigid, you can't change me, how long do you think that relationship's going to last?
I think there's kind of two sides to that, though. There is the controlling, one person wants to change the other to fit their image, in which case those two people shouldn't be together anyway. But there is the other side of it. I look at our relationship and I think of it more not as one trying to change the other, but we're both helping each other grow in the way that we have said that we want to grow. So, there are times I can point something out to you. It's like, are you aware that, you do this and it gets taken out? Is that really what you want to do? If that's what you want to do, so that's fine. Go for it, mate. But so, yeah, I think that amount is kind of the right balance.
I don't disagree with that. I guess where I get is I think we have hard and fast expectations that it is the expectation that undermines a relationship. If I'm hard and fast, you have no right to change me, that will undermine a relationship.
Yep.
As much as saying, oh, I'll be anything you want me to be,
Yep.
will undermine a relationship.
Absolutely.
Because sooner or later, you're going to begrudge that, and it's going to come back up. Again, relationships are about flexibility. They're not a tug-of-war. They're pulled together. Mm-hmm. And I think, you said that very well. Okay, look, I want to give some, get to some points that research has demonstrated are critically important. And I want you to comment on these as we kind of go along. Conflict is natural to a relationship, period, end of quotation. We have to expect that going in. That's all there is to it. The intensity of the conflict is up to us. We're the ones that choose how we're going to, vent that bad day at the office or that person that cut us off in traffic, and we have all this angst in our system, and we come home and we dump it on a loved one, a child or our spouse, okay? So when conflict arises, the data says that we should first look at the conflict in terms of, are we tired? Low estrogen, low sugar levels, and so forth. Is that what's underlying the nature of our conflict? Is that what's driving it? Is there some other trigger than the other person? What are your thoughts on that? I mean, you have to be pretty rational to be doing that.
I think that's right on. And I think I try to, think about that kind of stuff when I'm, there are times I'm having a bad day. And, and I can tell you enough, behave. No, but, there are times I can be shorter with you than I want. And there have frequently been times I have turned around to you immediately and said, I'm just in a bad mood, ignore me. Because I'm aware of that. So I try to temper that. You can temper it to a certain degree. Some things are going to get out of control. And then it comes down to, well, if your partner is behaving in that way, give them the benefit of the doubt too. Perhaps they're having a bad day. Perhaps there's something going on. So there is two parts of that. You want to try to temper yourself, understand that you won't always, And then, when your partner explodes at you, understand it's one snippet. It's not the whole relationship. It's one moment in time, and it doesn't take away from the entire history that you have or all the other bits that, it's just one little thing. So big deal, and let it go.
See, and there I think you touched on something that's critical to all relationships, and that's the importance of communication. If I have an open line of communication, if I can be who I truly am with you, I can say what I feel, and I'm not afraid that somehow you're going to divorce me or run away from me or something, I can then say to you, I'm having a horrible day, and I just want you to know that. So if I snap at you, hey, forgive me, you can get this stuff kind of, what should I say, framed in a way that it is less damaging. But you have to be able to communicate. How important is communication?
I would say that's pretty vital. Being able to talk, I think that's the best bit about the relationship you and I have. We talk about pretty much everything. How many conversations have I had with you? It's like, can I confess something to you? And I'm just telling you some deep, dark secret of mine, some thought I may have had, but being able to talk about it is very bonding. It makes it a whole lot better.
This is part of the problem then, as I see it with relationships, is in the early development of the relationship. Again, we're coming back to this expectation. I have to be this perfect whatever persona. And so maybe I hide a lot of things, and then I have to live that lie in my relationship. It's really hard, to come back and say, that's not who I really was, or, that's not really what happened, or, so going in at the beginning, I think we have to say to ourselves, if I'm going to have an enduring relationship, I'm not a salesman here to sham someone into believing I'm something I'm not. If they love me for who I am, then we can build a relationship. If I'm concealing who I am, then I can't expect that this relationship is really going to be a real relationship. Does that make sense?
It does, but I see a downside to it.
Do.
I absolutely do see a downside. And so you hear those stories where one person is so inflexible about, this is who I am, take me as you do, that they can destroy a relationship.
Oh, yeah,
too.
and I'm glad you brought that up, because that's not what I meant. What I meant is, one of the comments in the chat room was a couple, a woman who wore contacts throughout her early relationship with a fellow, and then the two get together, and then he discovers she wears glasses, and he suddenly, finds that that's a deception. We have lots of things that, for beauty reasons, hey, look, I can remember a fellow that worked for me came to my door early in the morning one morning, knocked on the door, got me straight out of bed. There was an emergency situation. I went to the door, opened the door. I'd known him for a long time, and he just paused, and he said, "My God, you're ugly in the morning." It's that side of ourselves that we have to be willing to expose, and instead of pretending.
You do. Because otherwise you can't ever be comfortable at home, because you're always hiding, you're always in fear, and oftentimes those things that you're hiding don't matter. And if they did matter, well, then you shouldn't be together anyway. So,
That's
no,
right.
you have to be able to relax. Your home, I'm a strong believer in the old English phrase, an Englishman's home is his castle. Well, it's not just an Englishman's, but home is a castle, a place of safety, a place of, it has to be that way.
Okay, let's move along. Coming back to this idea of conflict. The data says the problem with conflict is people often start dredging up all kinds of collateral things, instead of sticking to an issue at hand. Men would say women never forget. whatever transgression, and it'll come out in these. So the data says if you're going to have a conflict, if there's a disagreement, stick to the issue at hand. How important is that?
I think that's really important. Yeah, you're probably right. Women never forget. I think there's been some examples where you've certainly remembered some stuff that I'd forgotten too. It happens, and I think that is part of the maturing part of the relationship. Once again, it's to remember the history of all the good that you have without just cherry picking the bad from the past and bringing that all in. So yeah, that's great advice. You want to stick to what this one issue is and leave the rest of it out there.
Okay. Still staying with conflict. The data also says, look, you have a disagreement. You don't begin attacking the other person. Instead, you make this first person. I feel, I think, whenever you have these disagreements. And I'm hurt. That hurts me. I feel like you are avoiding me. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's great advice. I think, once again, that can go both ways as well, because it is possible to say, oh, that really hurt me, and for the other person to still take that as an attack. And I've heard of those examples too.
Less likely, though.
So
you as an accusatory. The minute I say,
oh, it's definitely,
you did this.
No. You're totally correct. You do not want to do the blame stuff. You did this and you did that and you're such a bad person. But what I'm saying is that, if you think someone has hurt you, or if someone tells you you've hurt them, then give them the benefit of the doubt too.
All right. Now, the next thing the data says is before you respond, hear it out. Listen intently. Listen empathically, or with empathy. How important is that?
Absolutely vital. I actually read an article today. I put it up on Facebook because I found it really interesting about listening to a person. Lots of people don't really listen. They are trying to form their argument as to how to win the argument themselves. They have one-upmanship. There's various factors. I should have pulled that up so you can take a look at my Facebook page if you want to see that article, because it was really good. But listening with an open mind is one of the best things that you can do in a relationship. You don't have to convince the other person. You don't have to change them. Hear them out. If you hear them out, then they're going to be more open to you. And so that holds for all relationships, not just intimate relationships, relationships in general. You give someone the respect of listening to them.
Okay, the last thing, I think we're going to have time, and there's so much more. I mean, we could make a 2-hour show out of this easily, but the data says very clearly it is critically important to be playful. I mean, adult life tends to emphasize productivity and seriousness, but playful people take time to prioritize enjoyment, pleasure, amusement, having fun. You and I play with one another verbally all the time. How important is playfulness in 1 minute or less?
Absolutely. It brings that sparkle in. It's a whole different kind of bonding to the sexual type of bonding. The playfulness part of it, that's the cherry on the top.
Okay. Now, I'm going to be a little playful with you this minute, okay? Can you put work into your relationship? There are lots of folks that say you can't work with your spouse.
You can't work with your spouse? Well, you and I have proved that one wrong. We have certainly worked together. When you and I first met, I was concerned about that very thing, about, we can't work together. No, you absolutely can. It takes respect. It takes understanding. But no, I think if anything, it has enriched our relationship.
I agree. I totally agree. I think when you have you have the right mindset, the right commitment, the intimacy that's involved in regular communications, the more time you can spend with a person that that you love, that you've dedicated your life to, that you're raising a family with, the stronger your bond is. It isn't that it weakens, but if you go in with the idea that, and I may have had this false notion to begin with, you taught me otherwise, I'm the boss. Well, okay. All right, we're out of time.
You can think that, honey, don't worry.
Here we go, playing together. Well, we've come to the end of another episode of Provocative Enlightenment. I want to thank you, Ravinder, for sharing in this show. I want to thank all of you out there for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed our show, and will join us again next week, same time and same place. And do tell your friends. And if there's something you'd like us to cover on the show, send me a note. Let me know. That's the reason we did today's show. So many of you asked for it. Okay, until next time, wherever you are in the world, remember, believing in yourself always matters.
Provocative Enlightenment has been brought to you by Progressive Awareness Research and other sponsors. Provocative Enlightenment is a syndicated show and appears on other networks. For a schedule of show times, visit provocativeenlightenment.com. If you're interested in becoming a sponsor, write to Eldon at eldontaylor.com.